good pile of logs though. Keep you going for a while. That's good, yeah. There you go. Let's put the e-brake on.
You want me to leave it in forward?
Yeah, leave it in forward gear. Alright guys, well I finally got that load of logs delivered that we loaded up in the last video, which I'll link right here. So Sean's happy, he's got the rest of his firewood for this year. Actually picked up his lawnmower too because he's having a problem with the belt jumping off the mower deck. I think he might need a new tensioner for it, so he wanted me to take it back to my house and fix it for him. So I got to fix that at some point this week. But yeah, now that we got that done, we can finally get started on the axle seals for the Kubota. Alright guys, so as I was saying, we're finally going to change the axle seals on my Kubota BX today. So a lot of you guys may remember when I changed out my tie rod ends. I installed a new inner and outer tie rod end. I also changed out the hydraulic steering cylinder brackets. And when I did that, I noticed that I had a bunch of oil leaking around my axle seals. And that was about, I don't know, 3 months ago or something like that. I've been meaning to do it for a while now. I've just been so busy this summer. So today we're finally going to take care of that. Another thing that I want to mention to you guys is I did finally get my hydraulic hoses shortened for my hydraulic top link. So you can see how short they are now. I had them cut to about 2 feet in length. So that works out much better now. I ain't got all that hose flapping around. So far the rear remote kit and the hydraulic top link has been working awesome. Now I'm just looking for a hydraulic side link as well. But yeah, so the axle seals that I got everything from Messick's. So what we got here is 2 O-rings, and these are going to be for the final drives because the final drives actually have to come apart to be able to get to these axle seals right here. And then here is obviously the axle seals themselves. Now these are a 2-part seal, so they have a seal within a seal. You can see this little ring on the right side here. This actually slides out of the main seal itself. And this tiny lip seal here, this actually goes on the axle stub, and then this seal seals up against it for your final drive. So that's how those work. Part number here is 6A320-56220. And like I said, that is the axle seal itself that's leaking. And then for the O-rings for the final drives, part number is K2581-15450. So that's that. And I also did buy a filter for my hydrostatic transmission because, as I said a couple videos ago, I do plan on changing my hydraulic oil. I'm going to be doing that soon. So in the next coming week or two, I'm going to be changing my hydraulic oil. But that's why this is here. And the oil that I bought for the front diff is 75/90 weight. Now Kubota actually states in their manual for their front diff, what they use is their Super UDT2. It's just a hydraulic fluid that they run in there, and I believe the reason they do this is just to simplify things. But honestly, I think the hydraulic fluid is just a little bit too thin for a front axle, and you get a little bit too much diff action. And what I've noticed is thickening the oil up definitely gives you a little bit more traction, especially when you're pushing into piles and grading dirt with the front end loader. So I always try to run like an 80 weight oil. I believe it does state in the manual that if you don't want to run the hydraulic fluid, you can run an 80 weight. So I kind of split the difference here, 75/90 weight, which should work just fine. So the front axle, they say takes 5 quarts, but most guys report that they can only get about 4.5 quarts in there. And then you're gonna have to continue to check it. As you work all the air out of it and bleed all the air out, you'll be able to get a little bit more in there. So I've got a couple quarts here, and I've got a couple more laying around in my shed. So I'll probably end up using like 4 of these or 3 of these. And then I also picked up this Lucas oil stabilizer. This stuff, I swear by it, I've used it my whole life. And right on the back here, it states that you can use it in differentials up to 50 or 100%. So you could actually use nothing but this. And the only reason I'm not is because this stuff's quite thick. And I don't want it to be like in the wintertime super thick to where the front diff doesn't get really any action at all. So I think I'm gonna do like maybe a quarter of it with this. So I'll put this bottle in first, and then the rest of it I'll top off with those. So it'll be like 3 quarts regular diff oil and 1 quart of this Lucas. So that should give me like a good 25% of Lucas in there. And this stuff also helps to quiet the diff if you're getting any noise from it. And it's got certain oil additives and properties that'll definitely make the gearing last a lot longer. So I'm definitely gonna give this stuff a shot, and I'll let you guys know how it works out for me. But yeah, we've got everything we need here to do this, so let's just get right at it. I'm gonna get the jack rolled over here. I'll get the front end jacked up, throw the jack stands under it. I am just gonna do the one side on video because the next side is obviously the same exact process. So once you guys see it done once, you'll be all set. And then once I get this all wrapped up with you guys, I'll move it over to this side so I have a little more room to work, and I'll get the other side done. Okay, so we'll go ahead and stick a jack stand under each side of the axle here to make this more secure. Give her a good shake, make sure it's stable. I'm gonna go ahead and rip this front tire off. We'll get the axle fluid drained, and then we can start ripping off the final drive. We've got a 19mm here. Rip these lug nuts off real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the other side as well, just because it's gonna be easier to access the drain port on the bottom of the diff to drain the fluid out. Okay guys, so now we got the tires out of the way. You'll find that there's two plugs. So there's a 14mm plug up top here, and that is a fill plug for the final drive. And then we've got a drain plug on the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is remove both fill plugs from either side of the axle. That way we can let some air in, so that when we go to release the drain plugs here, we can get this thing drained as soon as possible so we can get this final drive ripped off. Just go ahead and crack this loose. For now, I'm just gonna leave it like on the top thread there. I'm gonna do that to the other side as well. Okay, so now we've got the fill plug on either side cracked loose. We can go ahead and drain the bottom of each final drive here. Again, that's a 14mm. We've got a 7-quart pan here, as I don't expect to get really more than 5 quarts out of this. Let that drain out. And honestly, I thought that this would be black. It's not terrible. Okay, so while that drips out, I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the dipstick just to let a little bit more air in. As you can see, that made a big difference doing that. Okay, so while this continues to drain, I just want to go through with you guys how you can tell if your axle is leaking like mine was. So right in this crack right here, that's where your axle seal is, and this is where it typically leaks. Now what you'll find is a lot of like oily residue around it, as you can see on mine. So if you see this black residue all over that joint right there, you know for sure that the seal is bad. Typically these seals up here, where the knuckle meets the axle here, this seal typically never goes. It's always this seal here because this is the seal that's getting worked the most. This is the seal that's rotating, you know, back and forth, you know, 1,000,000 times a year. So if any seal is going to go, it's usually this one right here. Hopefully we can take care of that today, and we should be good for a while. So I'm going to continue to let this thing drain, and once this side's finished, I'm going to go and drain the other side. As soon as this axle's fully drained, I'll get right back to you guys. Alright guys, so I've got the axle completely drained. So I'm going to go ahead and thread the fill plug on there a little bit so I don't get crud in there. Do the same to this side. And then I'll put the dipstick tube back in. Alright, so now what we're going to be doing is removing the tie rod end. So we got to remove the outer tie rod end from the knuckle here. We have to remove the tie rod end because once the final drive comes off, this entire knuckle will be getting dropped off this main shaft here on the axle. So obviously we can't have the outer tie rod end connected when we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the outer tie rod end now just to get that out of the way, and then we can start pulling off this final drive. Okay, so on this tie rod end there is going to be a cotter pin, so we can pull it out. Okay, I got that straight. Go ahead and get a pair of dikes, pull that pin out. Okay, now we got the pin out. Now it's just a 17mm to get this castle nut off. Crack it loose, spin the nut off here. Okay, now we've got that castle nut out of the way. Now we can go ahead and give this knuckle a smack to pop out the outer tie rod end. There we go. Usually all you gotta do is give it a couple good smacks, and that'll break this tie rod end loose. Okay, so now we've got the tie rod end broken loose. We can now work on removing the final drive. So you're gonna have 6 14mm bolts holding the final drive in place. And then there's gonna be that O-ring on the inside. So I'm gonna go ahead and crack all these loose. I'll probably spin them all off except for one of the top ones. Give it a couple smacks at a rubber mallet just to break it loose, and then we'll pull this thing off and out of the way. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just stick this tie rod back in just for the time being so it holds it. Got a 14mm socket here. Go ahead and zip these off. Move these these two top ones loose. Get yourself a rubber mallet. That should break right loose for you. Okay, so now we're loose. Just make sure you have your drain pan underneath you because I'm sure there's still going to be some oil in here. Okay, and there's your final drive. As you can see here, here's the O-ring that we need to replace when we put it back on. And that O-ring just rests along the inside lip here, just like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this to the side. Okay, so now we've got the final drive out of the way. There's gonna be one snap ring that holds this knuckle to the axle. So let me give you guys a different angle so you can see the snap ring. I'll grab some snap ring pliers and we'll see if we can get this knuckle to slide down. Okay, so I got you guys set up the best I can. There's a snap ring right here. I don't know how well you guys can see it. You're gonna need some right angled snap ring pliers. And what you're gonna wanna do is just get the snap ring pliers on there. And the minute you open this up, this entire knuckle should drop right down off of there. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. If you can't see the end of the snap ring, take your pliers apart so you're just working with one end. And then you can kind of stick that one end in there and you can rotate that snap ring around. That way you could access both points. You could also rotate this knuckle side to side, and that'll also allow you to get some more access to the part of the snap ring that you need to get on. So let's go ahead and try to remove the snap ring now and see if this knuckle drops down for us. Alright, so I gave up on using this smaller pair of angled snap ring pliers that I have. I've got this much larger pair here, but they're not angled. But I think I can get it done with these. So I'm going to try these next, as I just couldn't get it open enough to get the snap ring off. I don't know how well you're able to see what I was doing there. So once I was able to pull the snap ring apart enough, the entire knuckle just dropped right down. So you'll know when you're completely out, it'll just fall right down, and now it should just slide right off there. Alright guys, so now that the snap ring is removed, just give it a couple taps with a rubber mallet. Comes right down. And you guys can see here on the backside just how greasy mine was and how bad it was leaking. I mean, look at that. I mean, it was really, really bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this up on a bench now, and we'll start replacing the axle seal. All right guys, so I've got the final drive all cleaned up. I used some brake clean and got all the grease cleaned off of it just so I got a nice clean area to work with. There was quite a bit of oil that was caked with dirt in this little valley. So I cleaned all that out so none of it dropped down in here when I replaced the seal. So now what we gotta do is remove this seal so that we can install a new seal, which is right here. So we've got to get this out of there, and to do that, I think what I have to use is basically just a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and what you want to do is cave this metal side in, and once you cave it in, you can get the screwdriver in there and just pop it out, because the side of this rubber seal has actually got metal on it. So if you bend that in, you can get the screwdriver in there and just kind of pry it out. So that's what I'm going to do. We'll work on that now, and once we get it out, I'll show you guys how to get the new seal installed. All right, so at this point, you're going to want to lean your final drive up against something solid, so that when you beat on it, this thing ain't wiggling all over the place on you. You could even put it in a vise if you want. So I've got a nice flathead screwdriver here in my hammer. Try to bend the edge of the seal here just far enough to get the screwdriver in, and we'll see if we can pry it out. Okay, I think I've almost got it now. Okay, I want to show you guys where I'm at here because nobody really shows this very well. So you can see how I've got this bent. Now there's like an inside lip that the seal rides against. I don't know how well you can see it in there. But once you get the seal bent past that lip, you can get your screwdriver right between the lip and the seal here. And now if I pry out, it should pop right out. Just like that there. And there's the seal. So the old seal is out now. Now you want to go ahead and clean up any debris that got inside here, because directly beneath that seal is a bearing. So you want to make sure we get this nice and cleaned up in here. Don't want any kind of metal or contaminants getting in that bearing. So get that all cleaned up. Make sure that you didn't hit this outside wall. You don't want to mar that up at all, otherwise your new seal is going to leak. I didn't get any marks on mine, so mine's good to go. If you do get marks on it, grab some Scotch-Brite and just kind of sand it off, you know, just to smooth it out, and then you should be all set for your new seal. Okay, now I'm going to take a quick mock-up of the old seal versus the new seal. Just make sure it's the same diameter, which you can see it is. Now I was describing in the very beginning how it's a two-part seal. So this little race right here comes out of the seal. You can see how that comes out of there. And this is like a metal race with a rubber seal on it. Now this is going to go onto the hub that the final drive slid off of. So this is going to get pressed onto there, and then seals up against this. It makes a nice tight seal like that, and it rotates. Now to pound this new seal in, you got to be careful because you don't want to rip or tear this new seal. I looked to see if I had a socket big enough, and I do, but the problem is it just barely hits this outer lip here. So it hits that lip, and I don't want it to tear it. So instead of using that socket, I'm gonna pull this old sleeve off of the hub because it needs to come off anyway, and then we'll slide this old sleeve into the new seal, and we'll use that to tap on with my socket. So that's what we're gonna do. So to do that, we're gonna have to pull that old seal off, and that seal is gonna be down here. You can see it resting up against the top of the axle. Get a screwdriver right in the middle of that crack right there and just kind of tap on it. We'll pry this thing down off of the shaft here. Hopefully we can get it off without ruining it. That way we can slide it into the new seal and use that to press the new seal in place. All right guys, so before I drive the sleeve off here, I've cleaned this up because you want to make sure this is clean. Otherwise it's going to give you some problems getting that sleeve off. I also wiped off all the excess oil off the axle, so we've got a nice clean axle to work with here. Now I'll go ahead and use my flathead screwdriver to try to get it right between the axle and the seal here. And I'll give it a couple taps and hopefully we can get this thing worked off of here. Okay, so I think I've got this worked down enough where I can get the screwdriver in here now. As you can see, it's actually pretty loose. You can just pry it down with my screwdriver at this point. Just go ahead and keep working it back and forth until you get the seal completely off the shaft here. Alright, there we go. So now we can go ahead and use this to install our new seal into the knuckle. Alright guys, so here is the old seal that we just pulled out. I've wiped it clean because I don't want to be getting any grit or dirt into our new seal over here. Let's go ahead and slide the old race into the new seal, just like that there. And now we're going to use that to tap on to seat this seal in place. What I've got to do that is a 2-inch socket. So this 2-inch socket fits perfectly along the top of that race there, and I'm going to use that to drive this seal in place. Before I start driving the seal in place, I'm going to put a little axle fluid just along the outside of this hub here. Also put a little bit along this new seal here. Okay, and that should be good. Now the biggest thing when you're driving seals in is making sure that you get a nice straight start. So you want to make sure you start it straight, and once you're straight, you know you can tap it all the way home. So I'm gonna see if I can get this thing started straight here. I know it's gonna be tough for you guys to see what I'm doing, but unfortunately I really don't have any other camera angle I can give you. I just keep checking it to make sure I'm going in straight as I can. Looks like I'm pretty straight. Okay guys, so I think I've got the seal bottomed out. As you can see, this top race here is pretty much flat. So now we've got to pull out this inner seal here and see what it looks like. Pry this old seal out of here, like that. And that should be what you're left with. The seal should be just below the outer edge here. And make sure that when you're looking at it, that the seal is level all the way around. So if the seal is the same all the way around, and you're just below this outer race right here, or this outer edge, you should be all set. So that seal looks good. I can go ahead and toss this older race here, and we can install the brand new race. So let's go ahead and install this next, and then we can throw the knuckle back on the axle. All right guys, now we're back down at the axle. You can see here there was all this nasty crud locked in between the axle and the seal. So you're gonna wanna wipe that nice and clean. Get this thing as clean as you absolutely can, because any of this dirt that gets in between that seal is just gonna make it leak again. Just end up cutting it over time and making it leak again. Okay, so I've got that nice and clean now. Now I'm gonna get a little bit of oil and rub it on this before I put the seal back in place. That way it's got a little bit of lube on it so that I can drive that seal up there nice and easy. Okay, so I'm just putting some more diff oil on this is what I'm using. Okay, so to tap this new seal in place, what I bought was a 3-inch OD to 2.5 ID piece of exhaust tubing. It's pretty much just an exhaust coupler or adapter. This fits the inside of the seal perfectly, so it sits on there just like that. And it's deep enough and long enough that I can get it up over the axle stub here without bottoming out. I tried to grab a couple different sockets that I had, but they weren't deep enough to clear the entire length of the stub. So I'm gonna have to use this, and it should work out just fine. Now most exhaust pipes are very sharp on the edges here, so I took my grinder and I just softened them up. So they're very smooth now, like I can't get cut or anything by it. Definitely do that, because otherwise the sharp edges here are gonna mar up the inside of the seal where that seal rides against, and you're just gonna end up having a leak again. So definitely make sure you've got this nice and soft where it's not sharp at all, and you should be all set there. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide the seal on here, making sure to keep it nice and clean. And again, you wanna make sure you get a nice straight start on it. And then once you do, you should be able to just tap it home. Okay, so that's what it should look like. You can tell it's butted right up against the top of the axle there. Make sure you're home all the way around, that it's nice and straight, nice and level, touching the top of the axle all the way around. When you're done, just make sure you run your finger on this. Make sure you don't feel any grooves or any marks. And as long as it all feels smooth, you should be all set, and you should no longer have any leaks there. So let's go ahead now and grab the knuckle that we just put the new seal in. We'll slide this back up on here and see if we can get that snap ring back on. I'll probably have to grab my jack just to kind of block that knuckle up and hold it in place while I get that snap ring in place, because the only thing that holds that knuckle from falling down is just the snap ring. Okay, so now that we got all that done, I noticed that Kubota used a silicone grease along this new seal here where it meets with this race here. So I've got some silicone that I'm going to be putting on this just because this is the last time it's ever going to get any grease. So I definitely want to make sure it's got adequate grease when I put this back in place. So I'm just going to grease the heck out of it. This silicone grease is good because it does not swell rubber. That's why people use silicone. Okay, so I've got plenty of silicone grease on the seal now. I'm going to throw a little bit on this race as well. Okay, now we've got that nice and greased up. Now we can go ahead and finally reinstall our knuckle. I've got a jack here handy to hold the knuckle in place while I reinstall the snap ring. Gotta make sure you slide the spline into the axle stub here. Careful not to hurt the seal. And when you slide it up, you're gonna have to rotate this gear here, and you'll kind of feel it lock into place, just like that. And now we know we're all the way in, and that's where it belongs. So now what I'm gonna do is use the jack just to hold this in place so that I can get the snap ring reinserted. Okay, so now I've got light pressure on the jack, just holding the knuckle in place. Now I can go ahead and get this snap ring. You can see the snap ring right here. So now I just got to use my snap ring pliers again to try to get the snap ring back in its groove, and we'll be able to let the jack down. Okay, got the snap ring back installed. Now to check to make sure the snap ring's in place, you should be able to grab it, hook it with your snap ring pliers. And if you could spin it like that, you know you're completely in that race. Otherwise it would be bound up. Once you're done, just check it. Make sure the knuckle spins back and forth nice and freely. Make sure you don't hear any weird noises with the bearings or anything like that. Feels really good, nice and stiff, no play back and forth. So we should be all set here. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our O-ring that goes along this outer edge here, and then reinstall our final drive. All right guys, so now before we install our new O-ring, just want to make sure you clean this edge up really good on your final drive. And once you got that nice and clean, go ahead and grab your new O-ring. And this O-ring is just gonna sit, like I said, right against that inside ring. Just like that. And you're also gonna wanna make sure the inside edge of your knuckle is clean as well. So this inside race right here, I've already cleaned mine, so it's all set. Now when you go to put the final drive back on, you'll notice that there is a big notch at the bottom. So you only got one notch, so you gotta make sure you keep that notch to the bottom. Go ahead and slide it back in place. You may need to spin the hub a little bit to kind of get it to seat in place. And I just felt mine kind of pop in place, so I know that's home. Make sure that the hub spins freely. Mine does. So now we can go ahead and reinstall our 6 14mm bolts. Now when you go and tighten these up, you want to tighten them up in a star pattern. I've got my impact gun on the lowest torque setting. I'm just going to get them snug, and then I'm going to tighten them the rest of the way by hand. Alright guys, now we got the final drive all done. Now we can go ahead and slide our tie rod end back into place here. Put your 15mm nut back on the bottom. Snug it up. And then because it's a castle nut, you got to get under here and make sure you line up the holes so you can reinsert your pin. So let me get that pin in there now, and then we'll get the wheel back on. All right, guys, well, I've got it all back together. When you get the tire back on, just make sure you spin it. Make sure everything sounds right. It's gonna be a little bit louder until you get oil in it. I did tighten both the drain plugs on both sides here. I left the upper fill plugs loose because I still gotta fill it with fluid, and obviously my dipstick's still loose here. Did the same thing the other side here. I've got the tire back on with 2 lug nuts because I'm gonna have to get this off the jack stands and shift it over so that I can do this wheel tomorrow. But at least now you guys know exactly how to do it. One thing I want to tell you guys is these inner tie rod ends that I got from Essex, these upgraded ones, they got the clear seal on them. So far I have not torn my seals on either the outer tie rod end or the inner. So hopefully they did actually upgrade them, because I've seen these actually rip pretty quick and I haven't seen anybody really rip these ones yet. So far so good, and I've worked it quite a bit since I've installed these. If you guys want to see that video, I will link it up here where I installed the new tie rod ends and the new steering cylinder brackets. But yeah, everything's good to go. I just got to fill it with fluid. One thing I will tell you guys when you go to fill it up is fill up the final drives first. So take out this plug here on the top and fill it until it comes out the top. You know, basically fill it full and then put the plug back in. Once you've got both final drives totally full, then you can go ahead and start filling it from this main fill cap here. When you start filling it from there and you notice it starts to get pretty full, go ahead and rotate the tires as you're filling it, and it'll help work the air out. It'll also help work the oil down into the final drives. You could also do that when you start filling them from this plug here. And that should get you guys in a good place where you got most of the air out before you even start using the tractor. And then, like I said, you're gonna have to keep checking it after you use it in 4-wheel drive for the next couple weeks or so. Keep checking it as it drops, top it off, and eventually it'll stop and you'll be all set. So that's how you do the axle seal change on a Kubota BX. Here's all the tools that I used. So I've got a needle nose pliers and a pair of dikes for the tie rod end. I've got my impact gun with a 3/4 inch socket or 19 millimeter. I've got a rubber mallet, a regular hammer, flathead screwdriver. I've got a right angle pair of snap ring pliers and a larger pair of straight snap ring pliers, which the straight pair actually worked better than the angled pair did for me. I used a 14 millimeter socket, a 17 millimeter socket. I used a 2-inch socket to pound a seal in, and then for the seal on the axle stub, I used this 3-inch OD to 2.5-inch ID piece of pipe, and that worked really good for getting it in. Just make sure you soften these edges so that you don't mar up the seal. I used a can of brake clean to clean everything up before it went back together, some silicone grease, and here's the old seals right here, and that's pretty much it. So I think anybody can do this, especially if they watch my video. You shouldn't have any problems. The trickiest part is getting the snap ring down, but once you've done one side, honestly, you kind of realize the trick to it. And now that I've done this side, I know I can do this side in half the time, especially when I'm not filming it. So it's not too bad of a job. I would say it's not any harder than installing them rear remotes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was informative. If you guys need any help, you know, just leave a comment below and I'll try to answer your questions the best I can. It's Sunday afternoon now, so I'm gonna try to get this video edited and uploaded hopefully by the end of the night here. I tried to get it out to you guys today, like early this morning, but I just didn't have time to get the job done. So it's done now, so I will work on the other side. Next time you see the tractor, it's gonna be all set, ready to go. I've got some pretty cool stuff coming up in some future videos, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and as always, we'll see you guys in the next one.